A Hall of Fame center just chose the worst team in the WNBA over sharing a locker room with one specific person. Not a better contract situation. Not a preferred market. Not a legitimate ring contender. Brittney Griner, 2 WNBA championships. A career that survived circumstances most athletes never encounter and came back stronger on the other side. Looked at the Atlanta Dream's new roster and headed straight for the Connecticut Sun, a team that spent last season near the bottom of the league standings. That single decision tells you more about what is happening inside Atlanta's walls right now than any press conference statement ever could, and training camp has not even started yet. Here's what you need to understand immediately. The Atlanta Dream just surrendered 2 first-round draft picks and a second-round swap. Genuine organizational capital in a league with one of the most compressed financial structures in professional sports for a player whose previous franchise suspended her for conduct detrimental to the team and then, according to multiple sources, exhaled with visible relief the moment she was gone. Griner had been anchoring that Dream frontcourt through a franchise record 30-win regular season. She left before a single practice rep, before one film session, before one team meal with her new teammate. The moment Angel Reese walked through Atlanta's door, Griner was already researching her exit, and the part that makes this story connect directly to Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever is this: that same dream team, the one built around Griner and a roster that had worked together and won together, walked into a first-round playoff series against an Indiana squad missing key contributors and playing well below full strength, and got sent home. A shorthanded Fever team with Clark operating below 100% eliminated the 30-14 Atlanta Dream. First round. Done. Now that same Fever roster is heading into 2026 healthier, more experienced, and more dangerous than the version that already proved it could do that. Atlanta just spent the offseason making their job even easier. If what you're watching here has been matching your read on this situation for weeks, hit that like button right now. This channel exists to connect the dots that most coverage leaves scattered, and your support is what keeps this investigation going. Let us go back to where all of this actually started, because the Angel Reese chapter in Chicago did not close quietly. She arrived from LSU carrying genuine momentum, a dominant rebounder, an all-star brand, the physical presence. A rebuilding franchise wraps its narrative around when it is telling fans that something real is being built. In her first professional season, she pulled boards at a rate that earned her all-star recognition. Her sophomore season produced more of the same. On the surface, the stat sheet looked like a cornerstone. Below the surface, the franchise was deteriorating. Chicago finished 13 wins and 34 losses in her first year as the primary identity of the organization. Then 10 wins and 34 losses in year 2. That is a combined 23 wins and 61 losses across 2 full seasons with Reese as the featured centerpiece. And the team was not plateauing during a difficult rebuild. It was actively declining year over year with the same player at the center. And the rebound totals that generated such impressive box score appearances, a significant portion of them came directly off Reese's own missed attempts. A player who misses layups at the rate she does is not generating second-chance opportunities for her team. She is manufacturing her own statistical output through self-created inefficiency at the rim. You cannot rebound your way to wins if you're the primary reason the ball is coming off the glass in the first place. The losing was damaging. What was happening inside the building was worse. When veteran Courtney Vandersloot suffered an injury, Reese responded publicly by calling her old and washed up. Vandersloot had built standing in this league through years of professional performance that predated Reese's college career. Players across every WNBA roster heard that quote, and they filed it. Frontcourt partner Camila Cardoso, who was supposed to be Reese's co-anchor in the paint, walked out of practice. When the player who is supposed to be your operational partner cannot complete a training session without leaving the building, that communicates something specific and clinical about what the daily environment inside that gym felt like. And in post-game media sessions after losses, Reese developed a consistent pattern of redirecting responsibility toward teammates, a pattern that players track, that agents track, and that front offices eventually have to formally address. The situation escalated to the point where Chicago suspended her formally for conduct detrimental to the team. That is not a standard personnel move. A franchise does not suspend its own headlining player without first calculating that the cost of not doing it has become higher than the cost of doing it. Once the trade cleared, Reese to Atlanta for 2 first-round picks and a second-round swap, the internal reaction from Chicago was not measured or diplomatic. A source speaking directly to Yahoo Sports described a situation where there was no love lost, and that the entire organization was very happy she was gone. A second source went further, stating that teammates had grown exhausted by the dynamic, and that the deal was very much needed for the health of the organization going forward. That is not one frustrated voice using a candid off-the-record moment. That is a locker room issuing a coordinated institutional verdict. Now consider what Atlanta actually looked like before this trade disrupted everything. The Dream finished 30 wins and 14 losses during the 2025 regular season. Franchise record, top 4 seed. Alicia Gray was generating offense as a skilled scoring wing. Ryan Howard was developing into one of the better two-way guards in the league. Brianna Jones completed a balanced core that had learned to function together, and Brittney Griner brought championship resume and the specific kind of locker room credibility that younger players genuinely absorb from proximity, the kind that comes from having been in the league long enough to have already seen every scenario. This was not a desperate franchise scrambling for any recognizable name it could attach to a press release. This was a team in genuine playoff conversation with real internal chemistry. And then the postseason happened. That 30-14 squad, franchise record and all, walked into a first-round series against an Indiana Fever team that was not at full strength. Key contributors were missing. Caitlin Clark was operating shorthanded. A depleted, banged-up Indiana group eliminated Atlanta. Gone, and instead of conducting a genuine organizational interrogation of the competitive mentality and late-game execution issues that actually determined playoff series outcomes, the Dream's front office looked at that first-round exit and decided the solution was Angel Reese. The logic behind that conclusion requires extraordinary mental gymnastics. It requires you to watch 2 consecutive seasons of a franchise declining around a specific player and conclude that geography was the variable, not the player at the center of every documented incident. It requires you to look at a team that lost because it could not close a depleted opponent and decide that the specific missing ingredient was interior rebounding from a player whose rebounds are disproportionately self-generated. It requires you to examine a suspension, multiple public teammate incidents, and a source-documented locker room that reported relief at her departure, and still hand over 2 first-round picks to bring that same dynamic into a 30-win environment that was already working. The draft capital dimension of this deserves its own attention, because in the WNBA's financial reality, it is not a minor detail. The league operates under salary constraints that make individual contracts modest by professional sports standards. In that environment, first-round draft selections represent meaningful long-term building material, the mechanism through which franchises access entry-level contributors at sustainable costs. Trading 2 of them in a single transaction means Atlanta has bet years of future organizational flexibility on a player whose professional history contains no evidence of producing winning environments. Those picks are gone, Griner is gone, and the team that just sent Atlanta home while playing below full strength is preparing for 2026, with a growing roster and a full offseason of preparation. Griner's particular resume gives her choice weight that cannot be separated from its meaning. This is not a role player making a comfort over competition calculation. This is a player who has seen professional basketball from every angle, who rebuilt her career under conditions most athletes never face, and came back to help turn Atlanta into a franchise record team when someone with that track record makes the specific judgment that a rebuilding Connecticut program represents a better professional environment than sharing an Atlanta locker room with your new teammate. That carries information. She has seen what these dynamics look like from inside the building. She made her assessment before a single-team meal. Many of you have been watching this situation develop and asking the same question in different forms. Why do the narratives being sold about Reese not match what is actually documented on the ground? Drop your read on that in the comments below. This is exactly the conversation that most mainstream coverage does not want to have directly, and this channel is not here to protect anyone's brand. While Atlanta was finalizing this trade and watching Griner pack her bags for Connecticut, Chicago was already demonstrating to the rest of the league what happens when a locker room environment changes. The rebuild was not gradual. It was immediate, and the contrast was sharp enough that every player agent and front office executive in the league took notice. Skylar Diggins-Smith committed to the Sky, a multi-time All-Star with legitimate scoring credentials and a resume that commands respect in any professional setting. Ricky Jackson arrived in a trade from the Los Angeles Sparks, a player who averaged 14.7 points per game last season and generates her own offense in ways that change how defenses have to construct their game plans. CBS Sports graded that trade an A- for Chicago, not adequate, not a lateral move. An A-, Azura Stevens signed a 3-year contract worth a reported $1 million annually, a floor-stretching big who spaces the floor and opens driving lanes in a way that genuinely alters offensive geometry. Every single one of those players either holds all-star recognition, all-defensive honors, or arrived specifically because of what they contribute to a winning organizational culture. Every one of them committed to Chicago within weeks of Reese's departure. That is not a coincidence, and everyone observing this league understands what it represents. Players were watching Chicago from a distance across 2 full seasons. They were evaluating the daily environment, speaking to people inside the organization, and waiting. The moment the locker room situation changed, they picked up the phone. No extraordinary recruitment was necessary, no financial overreach. The environment itself became the most compelling pitch the organization could offer, and the talent arrived accordingly. The Vandersloot dimension of the rebuild added a specific and pointed exclamation mark. Chicago re-signed Courtney Vandersloot, the exact veteran Reese publicly labeled old and washed up in a post-game media session after Vandersloot's injury. The franchise looked at the player Reese attempted to dismiss with a press conference quote, and decided she still belonged there. That re-signing communicated something about organizational values that no official statement could have delivered more clearly. It told every veteran player watching from across the league exactly whose version of the Chicago Sky the front office had decided to invest in going forward. The jersey situation crystallized what the organization decided about those 2 years with even more finality. Ricky Jackson wore number 5 throughout her high school and college career. The Sky handed it to her with no deliberation, no ceremony, and no public acknowledgement that the number carried any history worth pausing over. Reese's supporters flooded Chicago's social media channels demanding retirement consideration, which would be a meaningful tradition for a player who delivered a championship or spent a decade genuinely building something for a franchise. But Reese spent 2 seasons producing a combined 23-61 record and a formal conduct suspension in that city. The front office's response, a new player wearing the number before the offseason ended, communicated their assessment of those 2 years more clearly than any prepared statement could have. Before we continue, if this level of investigation is the reason you keep coming back to this channel, consider hitting that join button. Below, every member makes it possible to keep going this deep on the stories that most outlets treat as surface-level content. Your support is what keeps this going. Here's what the fan reaction on social media actually looks like, because it is not the reaction Atlanta's front office anticipated. Dream fans who followed a franchise record regular season into a first-round playoff disappointment are not primarily frustrated with losing Griner. They are frustrated with the reasoning structure behind why she left. The version of this story that the organization prefers is that Griner had aged out of a productive role in Coach Carl Smith's system, that her 9.8 points and 5.2 rebounds per game in 2025 represented a natural decline. But Griner's production numbers were secondary context to the primary story, and every veteran player in this league who has read the same reporting understands what the Connecticut choice actually communicated. You do not select a rebuilding organization at the bottom of the standings over a franchise record team with playoff upside, unless you're making a very specific calculation about what the alternative looks like on the inside. Share this video with someone in your life who still thinks Reese's rebound totals tell the complete story. The context behind those numbers is exactly what most WNBA coverage does not have the appetite to address directly, and they need to see what 2 years of documentation actually looks like. Now let us talk about what Atlanta's bet requires to actually work, because the math here is uncomfortable in ways that go beyond the draft picks. For this acquisition to justify the cost, the 2 first-round selections, the organizational disruption before training camp, the loss of Griner's championship credibility, Reese needs to do something she has never done in a professional setting: produce sustainable winning basketball inside a stable locker room environment. Her 2 professional seasons produced 0 playoff appearances, a formal conduct suspension, a practice walkout from her own frontcourt partner, and multiple public incidents that left a documented trail of damaged relationships with teammates who spoke anonymously to reporters about the relief they felt when she left. There is no professional evidence that the pattern changes when the city does. The fever matchup makes the competitive arithmetic even more pointed and more consequential. Indiana's injured contributors are returning. The roster that eliminated a full-strength Atlanta team while playing shorthanded is becoming more complete heading into 2026. Caitlin Clark enters her 3rd WNBA season with a complete full offseason of preparation behind her. No adjustment curve, no ramp-up period, no rust to shake off after an interrupted year. She has already seen Atlanta's defensive structure break down under playoff pressure. She already knows what that first-round series revealed about the Dream's competitive ceiling when the moment actually mattered. And Indiana's front office spent their offseason reinforcing the pieces around her rather than dismantling a functional core and gambling draft capital on an unproven locker room fit. That gap is expanding, not narrowing. Atlanta addressed a first-round exit problem, which was fundamentally an execution and competitive mentality problem, by acquiring a player whose professional track record contains no evidence of solving those specific issues. Reese alongside Gray and Howard creates combinations that look interesting in a preseason preview article. But Atlanta's problem against Indiana was not about frontcourt configuration. It was about sustaining composure while closing a series against a depleted opponent, executing in the moments that actually determine whether you advance. Nothing in Reese's professional documentation suggests improvement in either of those dimensions. Reese is now on her second professional franchise before her 24th birthday, and the reputation that preceded her to Atlanta is not a secret to anyone. With meaningful league relationships, player agents advise clients on organizational culture as a standard part of contract evaluation. The Players Association tracks locker room dynamics and player welfare in ways that inform the broader professional conversation across rosters. The discussions that happen away from press conferences, in hotel lobbies during road trips, between players who competed against each other in college, in group chats across roster lines, are where professional basketball realities actually get processed, and those conversations right now are referencing 2 documented years of a consistent pattern, a pattern that cost one franchise a formal suspension to address and cost another 2 first-round picks to absorb. Here is what the league is actually watching develop in real time, and why the 2026 season is going to answer questions that this offseason has made unavoidable. Chicago rebuilt in a single offseason: better players, a restored environment, organizational credibility that did not exist 12 months ago. Atlanta traded 2 first-round picks and a Hall of Fame veteran for a player whose professional reputation arrived in Atlanta before she did. Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever enter the new season with a deeper roster, a healthier lineup, and the specific institutional knowledge that comes from having already eliminated this Atlanta team in a playoff environment while operating shorthanded. The question is not whether Atlanta made a high-risk gamble. The question is, what happens when that gamble collides with a Fever organization that is methodically building something sustainable and a league that is paying increasingly close attention to what winning locker rooms actually look like from the inside? That collision is coming. This channel will be there when it does. If you want to be part of this investigation as it unfolds, subscribe right now and turn on notifications so you catch every update the moment it drops. We have a breakdown coming very soon on exactly what the Indiana Fever's 2026 roster looks like going into this season, and why every team trying to close the gap with Clark may have spent this offseason making the distance wider instead. Do not miss it. We will see you there.